The ocean can be both a friend and a danger. Throughout history, sad accidents at sea have left behind stories of bravery, loss, and important lessons. For many years, people have sailed the seas looking for new lands, ways to trade and adventure. But the ocean, even though it's beautiful and full of life, can be very dangerous. Today, we'll talk about 10 of the worst ship accidents ever, events that changed how we travel by sea forever. Join me as we explore these terrible events and learn what happened. Let's start with maybe the most famous sea disaster, the sinking of the RMS Titanic. This tragic event has been etched into the annals of history, not just for the sheer scale of the disaster, but for the stories of heroism, tragedy, and human error that accompanied it. On the night of April 14th, 1912, this giant ship, on its first trip from England to New York, hit an iceberg. The collision occurred at 11:40 p.m., a time when most passengers were either asleep or winding down for the night. The iceberg was spotted too late to avoid, and the ship's fate was sealed in those fateful moments. The unsinkable ship, as it was called, carried over 2,200 people, a mix of people hoping for a new life in America and some of the richest people in the world. Among the passengers were famous names like John Jacob Astor IV, one of the wealthiest men of his time, and Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's department store. But there were also hundreds of immigrants dreaming of a better future in the new world. The iceberg scraped the side of the ship, and that was enough to sink it. The damage was catastrophic, causing the ship's compartments to flood rapidly. Despite the ship's advanced design, it was no match for the forces of nature. Water poured in, and it was clear the ship was going down. The crew and passengers were initially in disbelief, but the reality soon set in. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, was among the first to understand the gravity of the situation. People panicked as they realized what was happening. The chaos on deck was unimaginable, with people scrambling for lifeboats and trying to find their loved ones. The crew did their best to maintain order, but the sheer number of people and the limited lifeboats made it an impossible task. There weren't enough lifeboats for everyone, and most of the ones that left were filled with women and children. The ship's policy of women and children first meant that many men were left behind, facing certain death. The lifeboats, designed to hold 65 people, often left half empty in the confusion. The band played music as the ship sank, making the terrible event even sadder. Led by Wallace Hartley, the musicians continued to play to calm the passengers, their melodies providing a haunting backdrop to the unfolding tragedy. Their bravery and dedication became one of the most poignant stories of the night. As the Titanic disappeared under the waves, the cries of the people left behind echoed across the cold North Atlantic. The freezing temperatures of the water made survival almost impossible, and the lifeboats that had been launched were too few to save everyone. Over 1,500 people died in the freezing water, their hopes and dreams gone forever. The aftermath of the disaster led to significant changes in maritime regulations, ensuring that such a tragedy would never happen again. The legacy of the Titanic lives on, a somber reminder of the fragility of human life and the unpredictable power of nature. Now, our journey takes us to the Philippines, December 20th, 1987. It was a time of festive cheer, with people eagerly traveling to reunite with their families for the holidays. The MV Doña Paz, a ferry, was traveling from Leyte Island to Manila. This ferry was a popular mode of transport, known for its scenic route and convenience. It was filled with people going home for the holidays, way too many people. The ferry was overcrowded, with more than twice its capacity, carrying over 4,000 passengers. In the dark, the Doña Paz crashed into an oil tanker, the MT Vector. The crash was terrible. The impact was so severe that it caused a massive explosion, lighting up the night sky. The tanker's oil caught fire, and both ships were quickly covered in flames. The fire spread rapidly, fueled by the oil, turning the vessels into infernos. The ocean itself seemed to be on fire. The flames danced on the water's surface, creating a horrifying and surreal scene. People trapped on the burning ships had a terrible choice: die in the fire or jump into the burning water. Many chose to jump, hoping to escape the flames. But the burning oil on the water made survival difficult. There weren't enough life jackets, and everyone was terrified. Panic spread as people scrambled for any means of survival, but the chaos made it nearly impossible to organize a proper evacuation. The Doña Paz sank, and more than 4,300 people died. It remains one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history, a tragic reminder of the perils of the sea and the importance of safety regulations. Now we travel to Halifax, Nova Scotia on the morning of December 6, 1917. It was a cold, clear day and the city was bustling with activity. Halifax was a key port city during World War I, serving as a critical hub for the Allied war effort. Ships from all over the world docked here, bringing supplies and troops to support the war in Europe. World War I was happening in Europe, and Halifax, an important port for ships, was very busy. The harbour was filled with military and merchant vessels, creating a scene of organised chaos. The city's residents were used to the constant comings and goings of ships, but on this particular morning, something extraordinary was about to happen. One of the ships in the harbour was the SS Mont Blanc, a French cargo ship loaded with a deadly cargo. It was carrying over 2,000 tons of explosives, including TNT, picric acid and benzol. The ship had arrived from New York and was preparing to join a convoy across the Atlantic. As the Mont Blanc moved through the harbour, it collided with the Norwegian vessel SS Imo. The collision caused a fire to break out on the Mont Blanc, and the crew, realizing the danger, abandoned ship and tried to warn others. The crash started a fire on the Mont Blanc and the explosives caught fire. The burning ship drifted towards the shore, and the fire grew more intense. People gathered to watch, unaware of the impending disaster. What happened next was one of the biggest explosions ever made by humans before the atomic bomb. At 9:04 a.m., the Mont Blanc exploded with a force equivalent to approximately 2.9 kilotons of TNT. The blast was so powerful that it shattered windows 50 miles away and created a tsunami that washed up on the shores of Halifax. The Mont Blanc exploded, destroying the ship and much of Halifax. The explosion killed nearly 2,000 people, injured 9,000 more, and left thousands homeless. The city was left in ruins, and the event became known as the Halifax explosion, one of the most devastating maritime disasters in history. Chapter 4 of Wilhelm Gustloff, A Wartime Tragedy at Sea. We now go to the Baltic Sea, January 30th, 1945. World War II was still going on. The sinking of the MV Wilhelm Gustloff is the deadliest sinking in history. The Wilhelm Gustloff, once a fancy cruise ship, was now carrying people fleeing the war. Over 10,000 people were on board, mostly families. A submarine thought the ship was a warship and shot it with torpedoes. The ship sank and over 9,000 people died. Chapter 5, SS Sultana, A River of Fire. Now we go to the Mississippi River in America. It's April 27, 1865, just after the Civil War. The SS Sultana, a steamboat, was traveling up the river, carrying over 2,400 passengers, mostly soldiers going home. The boat was too full. One of the Sultana's boilers exploded because it wasn't taken care of properly and was working too hard. The explosion started a fire and the Sultana sank quickly. Over 1,800 people died. Chapter 6, Costa Concordia, a modern-day disaster. Now we go to Italy, January 13th, 2012. The Costa Concordia, a big cruise ship, was on a trip in the Mediterranean Sea. Over 4,200 people were on board. The ship hit some rocks and started to sink. It was very confusing and people panicked. The ship eventually tipped over. 32 people died. Chapter 7, RMS Lusitania, Death in the Atlantic. We go back to World War I, May 7th, 1915. The RMS Lusitania, a British ship, was travelling from New York to Liverpool. A German submarine thought the ship was carrying war supplies and shot it with a torpedo. The ship sank in just 18 minutes. Over 1,198 people died, including 128 Americans. This event made many Americans angry at Germany. Chapter 8. We go to the Baltic Sea, September 28th, 1994. The MS Estonia, a ferry, was travelling from Estonia to Sweden. Over 900 people were on board. A bad storm hit, and the front door of the ferry broke. The Estonia sank quickly, and 852 people died. Chapter 9. We go back to 1782. The HMS Royal George, a large British warship, was near Portsmouth, England. Over 1,100 people were on board. The ship was being repaired and it tipped over too far. It sank quickly and over 800 people died. Chapter 10. We go to the St. Lawrence River, May the 29th, 1914. The Empress of Ireland, a Canadian ship, was travelling to Liverpool. It was foggy and the ship crashed into another ship. The Empress of Ireland sank quickly. Over 1,000 people died. The ocean can be beautiful, but it can also be dangerous. These stories remind us of the power of nature and how important safety is at sea. Each accident has taught us important lessons, and these lessons have made travel by sea safer. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to Globebit for more stories. See you next time.